If there's one thing we know about the Milwaukee Bucks heading into the offseason, it's they're going to do everything they can to surround Giannis with more talent going into next year and beyond. And in particular next year, with his free agency looming, with the Miami Heat, the Dallas Mavericks, those teams proposing great deals for him to go sign and play with superstar players, the Bucks are going to need to show that they can compete, and they're going to need to show that they can make the necessary trades to give him a shot at competing for a championship, because otherwise, although he looks likely to sign a supermax, there's every chance he doesn't do so, and no one's going to blame him if they don't give him the right pieces to compete. Now, quickly before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video right now, that would be much appreciated. I make content like this very regularly, and subbing to the channel also helps out a lot, and just means you're notified when I make these videos, so that would help out as well. I'm trying to hit 10k very soon, so that would be nice. Other than that, let's get back into the video. Now, we all know the Bucks need a change because whatever they're doing just isn't working. They've obviously been a great regular season for 2 years in a row. Last year's playoffs, they were actually very close to making the finals, but this year's playoffs, they just fell completely short. They weren't even very close at all to making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which for a team with an MVP, for a team that was the best team in the regular season, that's just simply not good enough. And by all reports, it seems like they're going to keep Mike Budenholzer. So the most obvious thing to do is to make a trade. And like I've mentioned, they've got three assets that I don't believe they'll go near touching: Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez. But outside of that, I think anyone is up for grabs. And outside of that, there's been rumors that they're looking to trade for Victor Oladipo, Chris Paul. Those have been the names because those are names that are on the market and they're players that you know can help a contending team, particularly Chris Paul. Look, he's old. He's got a very, very hefty contract, and his injuries are a concern. But we saw what he did to Houston, and we saw what happened to Houston when he left, and then we saw what he did to OKC, and I'm sure OKC will probably suffer a lot with him leaving as well. That's the kind of impact he can have. And having him alongside Giannis in the pick and roll, someone that can create shots for himself, someone that can create shots for everyone else on the floor, someone that's a great go-to scorer in the clutch, something the Bucks have lacked a bit, and someone that's delivered in the postseason quite a lot over the last few years. But like I mentioned, Chris Paul is a big boom or bust trade. Obviously, I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff in terms of his play, but there's definitely concerns over whether his body can stay healthy. This was the first year where he really looked healthy the whole year, and maybe that's a sign of things to come. But normally that's not the way life works. Normally when you get older, there's just more and more likely to get susceptible to injuries unless your name's LeBron James. Even LeBron's had a few knocks over the last couple of years. But Chris Paul, yes, he has had quite a few injuries, and to think that he's going to stay healthy the whole year, they won't need him to stay healthy the whole year, but to think they're going to rely on him to stay healthy in the postseason, because what they're going to have to do to get in CP3 is get rid of depth. You're going to have to get rid of probably a young guy like DiVincenzo, maybe a Wilson, Bledsoe, obviously, to make the contracts work, Robin Lopez. They're just going to have to throw in a number of people, George Hill, any number of players the Thunder want, they're going to likely be involved in a trade deal. So to be risking all your depth for a 35-year-old point guard that has had injury problems and has a huge contract, which leaves you with no flexibility going forward, it's a very risky move. Obviously, it could pay off, and if you bring in Chris Paul, you have CP3, Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez. That's the favorite in the East. That's a fantastic team. But then CP3 goes out injured, and you have no depth, and you're back to where you started, but worse. And obviously, what we've seen from the Bucks is what they have now isn't good enough to win. So it's a very boom or bust trade in that aspect, and that's why I think there might be a better option. And another option that has been rumored is Victor Oladipo. And I don't particularly like Oladipo because he's coming off a dreadful season. And even before then, he was averaging 18 points per game on like 42% efficiency. The year after his breakout year, he's had that real breakout year where he was fantastic. But then the year after, when he was still healthy, he was averaging, like I said, around 18 points a game on 42% efficiency. And sure, he adds more to the team than just that. Obviously, he's not just a scorer. He can play make. He can score in the clutch. He's someone that can defend very effectively, but there's nothing to suggest he's going to get back to where he wants to be. There's nothing to suggest he's going to get back to where the Bucks want him to be. And most importantly, he's someone that said he's looking for a huge contract, and this could be a Tobias Harris type situation, in my opinion. We saw what the 76ers, they gave up picks, they gave up assets for Tobias Harris. They probably overpaid because they thought they were in a window where they could win now, and that's what they did, and that's what teams often do when they're in that window. They overpay. And then what they did is they overpaid on his contract as well because they'd already given up picks, they'd given up assets, so they didn't want to let him walk for free because that just didn't seem to make sense. So they signed him to a max, which is well above his pay grade, and that's what the Bucks could end up doing with Oladipo. So those are the first two options. I think obviously there's positives that could come from it. Oladipo's got that potential to get back to where he was, or at least to get to an 18 to 20 point per game guy that can defend, that can create his own shot, that can create for others. And then CP3, I have no doubts over his playmaking. I have no doubts that if you bring him in and if you make the right move and if he stays healthy, the Bucks are the favourite in the East. I have no doubts over that, but at the same time, it's a very risky play. So this is where I think a different option that's been rumoured could be the right option, and that's a trade for Bogdan Bogdanovic. Now, Bogdanovic is a restricted free agent and is actually 28 years old, which might surprise a few people, given he was only a rookie a few years ago, but I have reason to believe that he still has room to improve even at 28, but we're going to cover that a bit later. Let's cover what we think a potential trade for Bogdanovic could look like. Now, supposedly the Bucks have told the Kings they are willing to take on Harrison Barnes' contract, which is seen as a negative given what he can do and given how much he's getting paid, and for a young team like Sacramento, they don't really need to be paying someone like that so much money. Barnes has playoff experience, he's a good shooter, he's a good catch and shoot guy, he can defend, he's a solid player that if they brought in, he would be in the rotation and he would play significant minutes from the get-go, so he's someone that they wouldn't mind having. They'd still be overpaying him, but if it means they can get in Bogdan Bogdanovic in a sign and trade, it means they have to bring in Harrison Barnes. Those are two players that would impact the team immediately, with Bogdanovic being the most important one to bring in, but Barnes is by no means a negative. But what a trade would look like would be, obviously, the Bucks would have to give up some assets, a DiVincenzo, their first round pick, which is at 24, and then maybe DJ Wilson, Ersan Ilyasova, George Hill, assets. I'm not exactly sure, but guys like George Hill, Ersan Ilyasova to make the contracts work, and then, like I said, some first round picks, some DiVincenzo type guys. Those are the things that the Kings would be looking for in a rebuild kind of situation. But getting back to what I said about Bogdanovic, I think there's room for improvement because when you look at other guys that have come from Europe, it's a completely different league. Guys like the other Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, those are just two names that come to the top of my mind. But these guys were all fairly old when they made improvements. They were around 28 to 30, and that's because they're coming from a completely different league, and it takes a while to adjust to a different environment. So to think that he doesn't have room to go from a 15 point per game guy to like a 20 point per game guy, I could see him do that. And obviously his playmaking has come along as well, and that's something we're going to talk about. But yeah, he's already improved every year on every year. He's gone from a 12 to a 14 to a 15 point per game guy. And then as recently as the bubble, which was only an 8-game sample size, he averaged over 20 points a game on over 42% from three and over 46% from the field, which is just fantastic numbers. And those are the kind of numbers, if he could give the Bucks, that's better numbers than what we've seen from Oladipo in like 3 years. And the playmaking he offers is really great as well. He was averaging around 5 assists for the Kings in the bubble with increased ball handling responsibility. The main thing that was impressive for most teams, for me, is Bogdanovic. We know what he could do with limited opportunity, but with more responsibility, could his efficiency maintain itself? Could he get overwhelmed? No, his efficiency went up, which I don't expect to continue, but it showed that his efficiency can stay around the same, and obviously he can still handle that bigger load as a playmaker, as a shot creator, and that's exactly what he showed against good teams in the bubble. But how exactly does he fit alongside Giannis and the rest of Milwaukee? We know what he provides, and that's shooting, someone that has averaged just under 41% on catch and shoot threes and is a 40% catch and shoot three guy over his career. And it's obviously important playing alongside someone like Giannis. It's something that can separate him from someone like Bledsoe, who they are currently relying on for playmaking and shot making, which both of them seem to go down the drain in the playoffs. And what Bogi is particularly good at is playmaking in the pick and roll. And this is something that a lot of people have wanted to see happen with Giannis as a role man. Given how much draw he has on the defense, it's impossible to not pay most of your attention towards Giannis, and that can allow Bogi to either get to the rim or just dump it off to Giannis anyway and let him do his thing inside. What also comes in his favor is how dangerous he is at shooting from every part of the floor, and the defense often finds themselves pressing up onto him a bit too high, particularly in the mid-range area because of how good a shooter he is. And that left the open roller under the rim on multiple occasions throughout the year. And if you've got someone like Giannis under the rim instead of someone like Harry Giles, yeah, that's going to be a big difference. Now, he's not someone that's going to hit you with a flurry of moves and leave you just in awe. He's someone that's going to be crafty, get to the rim, use his offhand to make layups, use his right hand to make layups, and then hit you with a few floaters. I saw him hit a few floaters on Drew Holiday in his 35-point performance against New Orleans. And if he's doing that on Drew Holiday, with Drew Holiday's body contact, with Drew Holiday's body control, if you can do that, shows me you can go up against playoff level defense and pretty much any guard defense in the league, because Drew Holiday's right at the top of the list. And going into the playoffs, some people might have question marks over his playoff performances. Look, he played for Fenerbahce in Turkey, and if I know one thing about Europe, just in general in their sports, it's their playoff environments are more superior to any American playoff environment. And that's just a fact. I'm sorry, but that's the fact. And he's been in a hostile environment, a very hostile environment, playing away playoff games and delivering in a few playoff games. I've seen his highlights in the playoffs. He was delivering, and he's an even better player now. He's not going to struggle with the playoff environment at all, and that's what we've seen with a lot of European players over the time. Now, like I've said, personally, I don't particularly like the Victor Oladipo trade. I like the Chris Paul trade. Obviously, it's Chris Paul. There's question marks over whether he can stay healthy and obviously his age. Bogdanovic is probably the best of both worlds in my opinion. I know he's a great shooter, which is something the Bucks would love to have alongside Giannis. His shooting could only get better. He's someone that can create for others. He's someone that can create for himself. And when he got more responsibility for the Kings down the stretch, he showed that he could deliver on that more responsibility in the last 8 games of the season in the bubble against top teams, putting up 20 and 5 on over 40% from 3. Someone that can operate in the pick and roll. He can do a lot of great things, and Bogdanovic still has room for improvement, like I've said as well. And going to a team like Milwaukee from a team like Sacramento, you can only expect him to make a jump. It would just be a perfect situation for him and the Bucks. And whether he's the missing piece, you bring in Harrison Barnes as well, that would make a great role player. And if Bogdanovic delivers like he did at the end of the season, then maybe he is that missing piece, because he's definitely going to provide more playmaking, more shooting, more shot creation than Eric Bledsoe is providing. And that's exactly what Milwaukee need. Maybe if you also brought in someone else through free agency, then you would have your final team that is ready to compete for a championship. But other than that, that's all I've got to say. I'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Bye.